A wrestler's ring name may be the most important part of the overall package. If you make your big debut and you're called Wankstain, you're dead in the water before you've even begun. Ain't no one cheering for Wankstain, and if they probably do, you don't want them as fans. It's a huge undertaking then, especially when you get presented with a list of horrible options. Wrestlers throughout the years have revealed terrible ideas they were pitched from creative, such as Frosty McFreeze and Mason the Mutilator, both of which would have stopped Steve Austin and Mick Foley in their tracks had they ever got all the way through the process. In short, it's important, which is why it's strange when performers who already have awesome names still have to go through this ordeal. And I get it, companies want to have ownership of brands and whatnot, but still, if gold is staring at you, grab the flippin' gold. I'm Simon from WhatCulture, and this is 10 awesome real wrestler names that are better than their ring names. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to stay notified. Ding, ding, done. Number 10, Titus O'Neil. Do you know what Titus O'Neil's real name is? Thaddeus Bullard Sr. I probably didn't even pronounce that correctly, it's so good, but the real kicker is the gimmick you could create out of it. Usually I wouldn't wish this on anyone, but seeing how Titus barely even appears on Raw anymore, why not get rid of O'Neil, switch things up and make him some super millionaire banker dude that harks back to the characters of old. If it gets him back on TV and lets him have some fun, why the hell not? It's too good to just ignore. It gets even worse when we remember his former tag team partner Darren Young, especially as that was his fake name. Darren Young! Not exactly the most inventive or creative thing now, is it? What's far more entertaining is his real life name of Fred Rosser III, and it blows my mind given they were a duo and this reality was never dragged into the world of fiction. Fred Rosser III and Thaddeus Bullard Sr. is such a good pairing, I don't even know where to begin. They're super heels even before they walk down the aisle, especially if WWE went and found a manager to really ham the pair up. Baffles me sometimes, really does. Number 9, the Steiner brothers. Now, it's not like their name ever held Rick or Scott back. They're among the most famous teams in pro wrestling history and will be talked about forevermore. Making themselves known across the world by suplexing dudes and dropping them on their heads, Scott even went on to become Big Papa Pump, the greatest mathematician in wrestling history. Rick wasn't exactly a flop either. What is strange is that no promotion ever thought to even try their real surname, which is actually Rex Steiner. Why it was ignored at all, I don't know. Maybe back in the day the Rex sounded too bizarre, but given that it is pronounced that way, or W-R-E-C-K if you need more, well, what are we doing? They wrecked guys in the ring, they're wrecking themselves outside of it. It almost seems like a worse decision to delete it from public view. It is too late now though, obviously. Number 8, Bray Wyatt. Maybe a name that would be more apt now given the status of Bray Wyatt. It's the real last name of the Eater of Worlds that's important here, and that's because it's Rotunda. There's few names more synonymous with wrestling than Rotunda, given that we had Mike Rotunda, or R.I.S., Blackjack Mulligan, who was the granddad of the group, and then Barry and Kendall Windham, who were their uncles. Even brother Bo Dallas is in on the act. The interesting part is Bray's real name does take all of these and push them together. Wyndham Rotunda. He's lucky in that regard too, because that doesn't work across the board. If he were to come back using this and WWE pushed the relevance hard enough, it may actually help Wyatt find a new path. It'll never happen, I imagine, as modern wrestling likes to distance itself from the past as much as possible, but the option is there. I'm just pointing it out. Number 7, Dean Ambrose. A classic case of WWE changing things around because they would like to have all wrestlers within their creative handbook. When Jon Moxley signed for the company, he became Dean Ambrose. It's not like that's terrible, but Jon Moxley ain't a bad name for someone who is meant to be nuts. It also sounds more like an actual name than Dean Ambrose, especially because in the real world, he's known as John Good. That's interesting too, because having the word good in your title when it comes to wrestling just adds something, even if I'm not sure what that is. It could easily descend into chaos and trigger one of the worst gimmicks of all time, and yeah, there will be some who say good is far too inspiring in the over-the-top world that this is. But to be honest, as long as they stop calling him the Lunatic Fringe, I'll be happy. That doesn't make any sense. Number 6, Brad Maddox. I really like Brad Maddox from a TV perspective. For some reason, his Raw general manager run entertained me greatly, and I always thought WWE could have done more with him. This may have happened if he had gone with his actual name, which was Tyler Klutz Warner. Straight away, that's a warning sign to someone like Vince McMahon, because you just know he would have focused on the word Klutz. Before you could blink, Tyler would have been tripping over himself and spilling tea down other people's clothes. It's still likely better than Brad Maddox, which was a little bit dry. Klutz's whole history when it comes to names is a bit weird, however. Before he got to the WWE, he was known as Beef Wellington, and for a while even went by Lord Ruffles. I mean, what? It gets better, as the last I heard, he would also take bookings as Mad MADDOX. Smart. Number 5, Bobo Brazil. I'm not sure the name Bobo conjures up much fear in too many people. Brazil is fine, that's a big country that people recognise, but by the same logic, we should start calling wrestlers Pingu Peru. That ain't getting over. We also need to ask questions because Bobo was born Houston Harris, and that's pretty strong all things considered. Sounds like a tough guy, especially in the territory days, and makes me think of someone who ain't gonna take no crap. The best bit is Bobo wasn't even the original plan. In what would have been even worse all around, the agreed name was Boo Boo Brazil, but it was misprinted on an advert and just stuck. What the hell is a boo boo other than what a child calls some sort of wound? Was that the gimmick? He'd get on the mic and tell everyone he just inflicted a boo-boo? It's wrestling, so the more unique the better, but this is one occasion where the line's blurred a little bit too much. Number 4, The Ultimate Warrior. Yeah, let's not pretend otherwise. The Ultimate Warrior is probably one of the best wrestling names ever, especially given the time it came around. Sounds like a dude who's going to whoop ya and whoop ya hard. If nothing else, it sums everything up. He's a warrior, and he's the ultimate one. I've got it, and I already assume you're going to be more than just flesh and blood. But let's not overlook Jim Hellwig in terms of how the product has evolved over the years. No matter what era we dip our toes into, that works, kinda. Hellwig is such a bizarre surname, it would have been accepted when things were a bit more cartoony, but it's also believable as a last name and therefore would have fit in when wrestling became a bit more grounded. If the Ultimate Warrior debuted on Raw tomorrow, Squared Circle would be up in arms. This gets horrendously complicated given that Mr. Hellwig legally changed his name to Warrior back in the day, but maybe that means Jim is up for use instead. Number 3, Jake the Snake Roberts. Another that's hard to knock too much as it's pretty much iconic today. WWE also got away with rhyming slang. Jake and Snake should be face palming stuff, but it's not. It just rolls off the tongue, fits the character, and fit the man. We are looking at this through a fan's eyes though. If you tell someone with no clue about pro wrestling that this dude is called Jake the Snake, I bet they laugh. Change that up and reply with, well, he's known as Aurelian Smith Jr., and they will undoubtedly think that's cooler, and if presented with the choice, probably would assume Jake Roberts was the name he was born with. Aurelian Smith Jr. even sounds snake-like, which doesn't make any sense, but there's a sinister, dastardly vibe to it. And at its very best, that is exactly what Jake Roberts was. Number 2, Kelly Kelly. Where the hell do we even start with this one? Kelly Kelly has got to be one of the more stupid names in wrestling. I don't really know what it meant, but Double K did have some success within the WWE way back when. There were even rumours recently she was looking to get back involved. What's stranger is that her real name is also as unbelievable as her work name because she's called Barbie Blank. Now, while it may not be the most kosher thing in 2018, when you remember the gimmick given to her by WWE and combine it with that name, well, it's madness the two didn't stick. It would have snapped together almost too well, but as ever, the company wanted ownership, so taking one name and repeating it was seemingly the answer. And yes, before you say it, technically her name was Barbara Blank, but let's face it, at least one person at one point called her Barbie. WWE definitely would have. Unless they were terrified Mattel were going to come a-knocking and do a bit of suing. That actually may have been a thing. Number 1, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. Ricky Steamboat's fake name didn't hold him back. He's a pro wrestling legend and is often considered one of the best technical wrestlers ever. That is a pretty cool accolade to have. The Dragon was also a true babyface, and to keep that up for your entire career is also a feat in itself, so he rocked. This is probably why all promotions went against using his real name, as that was indeed Richard Blood. Now that is badass, there's no two ways about it, but if you want to make a guy loved by the masses, you don't have his last name as Blood. You just don't. It could have worked though. Steamboat was famous for the colour he would get in his matches, so any smart booker would have spun this to say Ricky went after the Crimson Mask because he was Richard Blood. Couldn't get enough of the stuff. Eddie Graham knew better, however, and would give the name Steamboat to him, and before you comment, I'm well aware that it could also be called Dick Blood, given that Dick is short for Richard. Grow up.
My name is Chris Brooks, the Calamari Catch King. I'm here for one reason and one reason only, and that is to capture gold, specifically tag team gold. You see, it doesn't matter who Defiant wants to throw in my way. Chris Brooks and whoever he decides come in for those Defiant Wrestling Tag Team Championships.